My wife had a secret phone hidden in her jacket. A list of 11 people she'd told something to. My mother was on that list. My best friend was on that list. My name was at the very bottom with one word written beside it. Waiting. I read every word on that phone. Then I put it back. Made her coffee the next morning. And waited for her to be ready to tell me the truth. What she was hiding wasn't what I expected. And the man I had to become to handle it wasn't who I thought I was either. My name is James. And I want to tell you the story of the year my marriage died. And the year I decided to bring it back anyway. It started on a Thursday. The most forgettable day of the week. I came home early from work because my meeting got cancelled and the house was quiet in the way houses are quiet when they're supposed to be empty. Except my wife's car was in the driveway. I called her name. No answer. I figured she was asleep. She'd been tired lately. I went to hang my jacket by the door and reached for a hanger and knocked her jacket off its hook and it fell and something slid out of the pocket and skidded across the hardwood floor and came to rest against the baseboard. A phone. I picked it up. Turned it over. Looked at it the way you look at something ordinary that your brain is telling you is not ordinary at all. It was an older model. No case. No scratches. The phone of something that had never lived in a pocket or a purse. It had been kept somewhere safe. Somewhere it wouldn't get damaged. I stood in the hallway of my own house. And understood in the particular wordless way that the body understands things before the mind catches up. That my life was about to change. I heard her moving upstairs. I put the phone back in the jacket pocket. Hung the jacket back on the hook. Went to the kitchen and started making dinner like a man who had found nothing. Her name is Claire. We'd been married 7 years. No kids yet. We'd been talking about it. Or I thought we'd been talking about it. Claire came downstairs 20 minutes later, hair slightly messy from sleep, said, "Sorry I crashed after my run." I said, "No worries." I said, "How was your day?" She said, "Fine." And I watched her move around our kitchen and thought about the phone in her jacket pocket and felt the distance between us like a physical thing. A wall I hadn't known was being built. That night I waited until she was asleep. Went downstairs. Took the phone from the jacket. And opened it. The lock screen was dark. No photo. Just the default black of a phone that belonged to no one. The passcode was 4 zeros. Not our anniversary. Not her birthday. Not anything that meant something. A passcode that said, "This phone is not mine." Inside were 2 things. A messaging app I didn't recognize. And a call log. I opened the messages first. There was one conversation. The contact had no name. Just a number. And the messages went back 4 months. 4 months. I scrolled to the beginning. The first message from Claire said, "I can't stop thinking about yesterday." The response. "Neither can I. Claire. We need to be more careful." The response. "I know. Same time Friday. Claire." Yes. My chest constricted. I kept reading. The messages were not explicit. They were something worse than explicit. They were intimate. The kind of intimacy that doesn't need explanation. References to places I didn't know. Jokes that assumed a shared history. The easy shorthand of 2 people who had learned each other. One message from 3 months ago hit me like a physical blow. Claire had written, "Sometimes I think he knows." The response. "Does he seem different?" Claire. "No, he's the same. That's almost the problem. He's exactly the same and I'm completely different and he can't tell. I'm completely different and he can't tell." I stood in my kitchen at midnight. Holding evidence that my wife had been living a parallel life for 4 months. And the worst part, the part that would stay with me for a long time, was that she was right. I hadn't been able to tell I thought about every dinner we'd shared in those 4 months. Every morning. Every night. Every time she'd said "I love you" and I'd said it back. Without knowing I was the only one who meant it. Here is what I did not do. I did not call the number. I did not wake her up. I did not throw anything or break anything or do any of the things my body was suggesting with considerable urgency. What I did was put the phone back. Go upstairs. Lie down beside my wife. And stare at the ceiling until morning. Because my father told me something once that I had never forgotten. He said, James, the first thing anger wants you to do is almost never the right thing. So I waited. And while I waited, I planned. The next morning I made her coffee. Set it on the counter the way I always did. Kissed her cheek the way I always did. Said have a good day the way I always did. And watched her walk out the door. And then I sat down at the kitchen table. And started writing everything down. Every detail from the messages. Every date. Every reference to a place. Because I am a methodical man. And if my marriage was going to end, it was going to end with the full picture. Not half of it. I called my friend Derek that afternoon. Derek, who had known me since college. Derek, who had been the best man at my wedding. Derek, who I trusted more than anyone except the woman who was currently betraying me. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What do you need?" I said, "I need to know who she's been seeing." Derek knew a man. Of course he did. His name was Vincent. And Vincent was the kind of private investigator who looked like someone's accountant and saw everything. We met at a coffee shop. I slid him a piece of paper with the number from the secret phone. He looked at it. Looked at me. Said, "Give me 72 hours. The 72 hours were the longest of my life. I went to work. Came home. Made dinner. Watched television beside my wife. Let her fall asleep on my shoulder. And felt the entire time like an actor in a play about my own life. On the third day, Vincent called. He said, "I have a name." The name was Marcus Webb. 38 years old. Commercial real estate. Office downtown. Married. I heard that last word and felt something shift inside me. Not surprise. Something colder than surprise. "He's married," I said. Vincent said yes. 2 kids. His wife's name is Diane. I sat with that. Somewhere across the city there was a woman named Diane. Who had no idea. Just like me. Vincent sent me a file. Photographs. Timestamps. Locations. Claire and Marcus Webb at a restaurant I'd never been to. Claire and Marcus Webb at a parking garage downtown. Claire and Marcus Webb outside an apartment building in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. 14 photographs over 3 weeks. Each one a small, precise destruction. I looked at every single one. Then I closed the file. And I made a decision. Not the decision you're expecting. Here's the thing about betrayal that nobody tells you. The first decision isn't what to do about the person who hurt you. The first decision is what kind of man you want to be when you do it. I thought about that for 3 days. I thought about 7 years of marriage. I thought about the woman who had held my hand at my father's funeral and not said a single word because she understood that sometimes words are the wrong thing. I thought about the way she laughed at her own jokes before she finished telling them. I thought about the life we built. And I thought about what I actually wanted. Not what I was supposed to want. Not what anger was telling me to want. What I actually wanted. And the answer surprised me. I wanted the truth. Directly from her. I wanted to look my wife in the eye and hear her say it. Because I'd spent 3 weeks performing normal while carrying evidence of her betrayal, and the performance had taught me something important. I was done performing. I was done pretending. And if she wanted to save this marriage, she was going to have to be done pretending too. I chose a Sunday. Sunday morning. The most honest time of the week. She was making breakfast. Sunlight coming through the kitchen window. The radio on low. The smell of coffee and eggs. The exact picture of a normal life. I sat down at the table. And I said, "Claire, I need to show you something." She turned. Spatula in hand. Expression open and unsuspecting. And I placed Vincent's file on the table. And slid it toward her. She looked down. And the spatula fell out of her hand. She didn't reach for it. She stood very still. Looking at the photographs. Her face went through 5 different expressions in 10 seconds. And then it went completely still. The still of someone who has been caught and knows it. And knows that running is no longer an option. She looked up at me. James. How long? I said. She closed her eyes. How long, Claire? 4 months, she said. Her voice barely audible. 4 months. I nodded. I already knew. I just needed her to say it. Is it over? I said. She opened her eyes. Yes, she said. It's been over for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. So the last 3 weeks of our performances. Of dinners and television and her falling asleep on my shoulder. She'd already ended it. And she'd been carrying that alone. The same way I'd been carrying the phone. 2 people sitting in the same house. Each one holding the other's secret. Why? I said. And that question. That single word. Opened something in her. She sat down across from me. And for the first time in what I realized had been a very long time. She was completely honest. She said. I was lonely, James. Not physically, not logistically. I was lonely inside our marriage. I felt like we were running a household together and we were good at it, but somewhere along the way we stopped actually seeing each other, and I know that's not an excuse. I know what I did was wrong, and I know I'm the one who chose wrong, but I need you to understand that I didn't fall into this because I stopped loving you. I fell into it because I forgot that you were someone I could talk to. I forgot that you were someone I could talk to. I sat with that sentence for a long time. Because here is the thing I did not expect. I understood it. I didn't want to understand it. But I did. I thought about the last year. How many evenings I'd come home and gone straight to my laptop. How many weekends had been eaten by work projects. How many times she'd said, "Do you want to talk?" and I'd said, "About what?" and she'd said, "Nothing, never mind." How many times I had been physically present and entirely absent. I had not caused her betrayal. I want to be clear about that. She had made a choice. A devastating choice. And that choice was hers. But I had made choices too. Smaller choices. Quieter choices. The choice to be busy instead of present. The choice to assume that love maintained itself. The choice to stop actually looking at the person sleeping beside me. We had both been building the wall. She had just been the one to walk through it. I said. I found the phone 3 weeks ago. She went completely still again. You knew. I knew. The color drained from her face. James, I let her sit with it. Then I said. I need to ask you something and I need the truth. She nodded. Do you want to save this marriage? She didn't hesitate. Yes, she said. Her voice cracked on that single syllable. Yes, James, I know I don't deserve to, and I know I have no right to ask, but yes. I looked at my wife. This woman who had broken something fundamental. This woman who had also just been more honest with me than she'd been in a year. And I said. Then we're going to do this differently. Not the same as before. Not a patch on top of damage. Differently. She was crying now. Quietly. The way Claire cried when she was trying not to. What does that mean? She said. It means we get a therapist, I said. A good one. And we both say every true thing. No more performances. No more lonely in the same house. We figure out what we actually want from each other and we build that. Not the life we've been performing. A real one. She pressed her hands over her face. Why? She said, her voice muffled. Why would you do this for me after what I did? I was quiet for a moment. Then I said. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for the marriage we should have had. The one we were both too comfortable to actually build. She looked at me through her fingers. And then she said something I will never forget. She said. I left that phone in my jacket pocket on purpose. I stared at her. She said. I'd been trying to tell you for 3 weeks. I didn't know how. So I left it where you'd find it. And when you didn't say anything, I thought maybe you hadn't found it. But part of me wondered if you had and you were just waiting. I was just waiting, I said. I know, she said. We looked at each other across the kitchen table. The spatula still on the floor between us. The eggs still on the stove. The file still open in front of us. And I understood something in that moment that I couldn't have understood 3 weeks earlier. Sometimes people show you what they can't say. Sometimes a secret left where it can be found is not carelessness. It's the only door someone knows how to open. I'm not telling you what she did was right. It wasn't. I'm not telling you the next year was easy. It was the hardest year of my life. We found a therapist. Her name was Dr. Bell. And she had the specific gift of making you say the thing you came in planning not to say. In those sessions I learned that I had spent 7 years being a good provider and a reliable partner and an almost entirely unavailable husband. Not cruel. Not absent in ways people would notice from the outside. Just quietly. Consistently. Elsewhere. Claire learned that loneliness without a language becomes a decision. That the thing you can't say to your husband eventually becomes a secret you carry to someone else. That asking for what you need is a skill. And she had never learned it. And neither had I. We learned together. Marcus Webb's wife Diane called me 4 months after that Sunday morning. She had found out. She didn't know how. She just said, "I think our spouses were involved." I said, "I know. I'm sorry." I said, "I know. I'm sorry." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How did you find out?" I said. "She left the phone where I'd find it." Diane said. "What does that mean?" "It means she wanted to stop," I said. "It means some part of her was asking to be caught." Another silence. Then Diane said, "Are you staying?" I said, "We're trying." She said, "I don't know if I can." I said, "You don't have to decide today." She said, "How do you do this?" I said, "One true thing at a time." That was 18 months ago. Claire and I still see Dr. Bell. Once a month now instead of every week. We sold the house we'd been performing our marriage in and bought a smaller one. One with a porch we actually sit on. One with a kitchen table we actually talk at. It's not the marriage we had. It's better than the marriage we had. Last month we finally had the conversation about children. The real one. Not the one we'd been having for appearances. The one where we said what we actually wanted. And what we actually feared. And what we actually needed from each other if we were going to do it. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. Afterward she said, "Why couldn't we talk like this before?" I said, "Because we were too busy being fine. I think our spouses were involved." I said, "I know. I'm sorry." She laughed. The laugh that starts before the joke is finished. The laugh I fell in love with. I thought about the phone in the jacket pocket. About the men who'd found it and put it back. About the 72 hours with Vincent. About the Sunday morning with the file on the table. About the spatula on the floor. About all the small moments that had been building toward something breaking. And then toward something being built. I thought about Diane. Who had called me 4 months in. Who had made her own decision. Who was doing it her own way. And I thought about the thing my father told me. The first thing anger wants you to do is almost never the right thing. He was right.